Pokémon Go has arguably made the world a more exciting place. GPS maps might have been a mundane feature once upon a time, but now incorporated into a gaming app, it has become the latest craze. Whilst the rest of the world has been enjoying Pokémon Go since its release on July the 6th, Asian fans have been fuming, and rightly so. Despite being the birthplace of the franchise, the company behind the app hasn't yet fully released in the region. So far, North America, most of Europe, Australia, and New Zealand have got the game app. And now at least 2 countries, Japan and Hong Kong, have got it too. Niantic, the San Francisco-based company, the primary developer behind the app, hasn't officially stated the reasons behind the delayed rollout in Asia, but many suspect they're beefing up their servers and testing out the app before it's fully released to the largest Pokémon fan base in the world, which, if you didn't know, has over half of the world's global population. Throughout the month, fans in Asia have expressed their frustration on social media and elsewhere. One Twitter user said, "I'm pretty convinced I'd be dead before they release Pokémon Go in Asia," with another saying, "I hope Niantic knows the torture for all the other countries who still doesn't have Pokémon Go." The wait is nearly over. When Japan got the go-ahead, fans were ecstatic and came out to the streets in force.
Twitter 見てたら配信開始っていう記事を見て、あ、嘘、インストールしなきゃと思った。みんなでインストールを一斉に。
なんかちょっと結構やっぱ歩かないといけないから面倒くさいかなっていうのはあります。
まあでもなんかワクワクはしますね、やっぱり。どんなのがいるのかなとか思いながらこうやってます。
So what is the craze about the game which has caught the world and is about to explode in the world's largest continent? The Pokémon franchise began in 1996 when its first video games came out on the Nintendo Game Boy called Pocket Monsters Red and Green. These proved extremely popular, which resulted in an enhanced blue version, which was reprogrammed as Pokémon Red and Blue for international release, which is the title most fans are familiar with. Successive games were then released in pairs like this, with then trading cards, anime series, movies, comic books, and toys being introduced. Pokémon is the second most successful and lucrative video game-based media franchise in the world, behind only the Mario franchise. The concept behind the game centers on fictional creatures called Pokémon, which humans, known as Pokémon trainers, catch and train to battle each other for sport. There are 2 general goals. First, to complete the Pokédex, an electronic Pokémon data system, by collecting all of the available Pokémon species found in the fictional region where a game takes place. And second, to train a team of powerful Pokémon to compete against teams owned by other trainers and eventually win the fictional Pokémon League. The Pokémon anime series and films are the other popular part of the franchise. It follows the quest of the main character, Ash Ketchum, a Pokémon master in training, as he and a group of friends travel around the world of Pokémon. The original series begins with Ash's first day as a Pokémon trainer. His first and signature Pokémon is a Pikachu, the Pokémon face of the franchise. Now the world of Pokémon Go has brought a new dimension to the franchise. Instead of catching Pokémon in the various fictional worlds of Pokémon, fans like me are now real-life trainers, catching creatures in our local area, public places, and even in our own backyards. The childhood dreams just got real, with people of all ages playing the game now. I'm with Reeb, and he's a regular Pokémon Go player. How are you finding it so far?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's a very, very good game. When the servers are up and running, but half the time is spent just waiting to get back into the game right now. So very good.
What level are you on?
15?
That's pretty good.
It's okay. Yeah, I guess. I'm not one of those people who's like quit my job to play it or anything. But yeah.
And what's your favourite Pokémon?
Meowth. Yeah.
Why?
Because I like cats.
Do you have any tips or tricks for Pokémon Go players?
Don't go crazy about it. Like don't go out like one of those people getting run over. Don't do it and drive. Don't go into dodgy areas. Just have fun with it and do it with your friends. I've got a 12-year-old brother, and kids from that generation, they've traditionally always been glued to their screens playing games, and now they're all like going out in groups to the park. He actively wants to go out like running just to hatch eggs, look for Pokemon, so it's a great thing.
In this world, there are Pokestops at various landmarks and places where you can collect a variety of items. Poke gyms where you can find other users' Pokemon in battle. And Pokemon lurking all around you, ready to be caught. Its popularity has boomed, with it overtaking Twitter, Snapchat and other social media platforms. But with any virtual reality game, it hasn't come without its controversies. Due to its interaction with the real world, security concerns have been raised. First, the risk of accidents and injury that can happen because users are so focused on the game. Second, the risk of young people going out and about to secluded unknown areas. Niantic has advised people to go out in groups whenever possible. And other criticisms include the app being used in locations such as cemeteries and memorials as sites to catch Pokemon, including the Auschwitz-Birkenau State Museum, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and the National September 11 Memorial and Museum. But there has been praise on how the game has changed social and cultural interaction. For example, it has encouraged people to go out of their homes and explore their home city, meeting new people and getting fit at the same time. It has also boosted business and tourism, where sites and shops have been designated as Pokestops and gyms, with commercial deals now starting to be made with developers to promote their businesses. The arrival of Pokémon Go in Asia has been welcomed, with plenty more when other Asian countries are allowed to join in. The reaction fans have shown may be justified, but one thing for sure is that whilst fans around the world go on their missions to catch them all, Niantic has definitely caught the world.
Joining me now to explore the game and its impact is acclaimed game designers Dr Chris Bateman from the University of Bolton and Dr Richard Bartle, Professor of Computer Game Design at the University of Essex, who is best known for having co-written the real world's first virtual world. So thank you guys for joining us. Firstly, Dr Bateman, of course you're a game designer yourself at the very top level. So what are your initial thoughts on the game and have you gotten addicted to it?
I haven't got time to play it, sadly, but I've been watching many other people play it, and I've been following Niantic, the developer who make it, for several years now. It's a really interesting case. It's what we call augmented reality, and augmented reality games have been around for a while, but this is the first game of that style to really hit mainstream, and largely due to the popularity of the Pokemon brand itself.
And Dr Bartle, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go along with what Chris said there. There's been this kind of augmented reality game for some time, but the fact that this one's got a well-known intellectual property has brought it into the forefront and giving a lot of people at the same time their first experience of an augmented reality game, and they're liking it. It's quite novel. Okay,
so before we go to the impact of the game on the gaming world, Dr Bateman, in terms of Asia, why do you think it has been so slow to be released there?
Yeah, it's a totally practical problem in this case. Whilst it is the case that a lot of the Asian markets get second fiddle for game releases, in this case, there's a practical problem. The game uses a database, a listing of locations, and the locations were actually built from Niantic's previous game, Ingress, which is 3 years old now. And unfortunately, a lot of the Asian countries are lacking information for Ingress because there haven't been many Ingress players. So if I can give you a point of comparison, Japan, where it has opened, has 455,000 portals in Ingress, and that translates into Pokestops and gyms in Pokemon Go. India, by comparison, has 51,000, and it means that whereas Japan has more than one feature for every kilometre, India has less than 1% coverage, and there's just not the database yet to release in every country.
So how long do you think it will take for them to start, building
It's going to be
all the
very
locations?
difficult, because they build these databases largely manually by contributions from players. Certainly, the more Ingress players a country picks up, the faster Niantic will be able to release Pokemon Go. So if you're out there in an Asian country and you want to get Pokemon Go faster, you should start playing Ingress to help them build the database. But I imagine they may have to take some extra steps to accelerate it if they want to get the game out as quickly as everyone would like it released in all these countries.
Okay, and now moving on to the impact of the game. Dr. Bartle, with the game being a world within the real world, how has it changed the way people game?
Well, it's not so much changed the way that they game. This is an extension of Nintendo's idea from the Wii of being very physical, making you get out there and do things and stopping you from dying of sedentary lifestyle. So it's helping in that respect, but in terms of actual being a great game or lasting forever, well, that's a bit different. We can perhaps talk about that later. Carrying on from what Chris was saying as well, the cultural impact in different places will need to be able to react to what the perceptions are from how it's being played elsewhere. So for parts of Asia where they don't have the game, they'll be looking at how it's being received in Northern Europe, in Europe and the North America and in Australia. And from that, they'll be then figuring out how they're going to interpret it themselves when they start to play. Because if you've got a game with hardly any places to visit, it's not going to be a lot of fun to start with. So they'll be needing to, people will be getting their own narrative, figuring out how best to play it, except in China where they won't let you play it.
And Dr. Bateman, in terms of augmented reality games, do you think this whole Pokemon Go craze will be a catalyst in terms of, the explosion of other sort of games, linked to popular franchises?
I'm uncertain. It's very difficult. Certainly, there'll be a number of investors looking at whether or not they want to put money in this. But until Niantic show really strong returns on running the game, it's going to be a little bit difficult to judge how that's going to proceed. But I mean, it certainly opens the door. And there's interesting new business models that can emerge here that we've not had the opportunity to do, such as, for instance, a coffee shop paying Niantic a fee to become a Pokestop or some other place that players want to visit to increase foot traffic. At the moment, that's happening largely at random. It's what Ingress players did determines where's worth visiting. But it's certainly possible that Niantic could start monetizing the locations in the game world, and that would be a very different business model.
So just very quickly, you have mentioned Ingress. Just for the benefit of our viewers, what is Ingress?
Yeah, well, Ingress, it is very much like Pokemon Go, except instead of traveling around collecting Pokemon in the real world, there's an alien race that's invading from another dimension, and players decide whether to help them invade or to prevent them from invading. So it's another augmented reality game, and it uses a lot of the same code and a lot of the same database that Pokemon Go uses. But it hasn't had such wide appeal because it's a nerdier setup. Although obviously Pokemon's fairly nerdy in itself, it doesn't have the mainstream appeal that something like the Pokemon license does.
And Dr. Bartle, in terms of the benefits of the game, going into the real world, there has been talk of combating depression, in terms of boosting tourism to a lot of sites, business opportunities like Dr. Bateman mentioned. Do you think this is a benefit to a lot of mankind?
Well, it's a benefit to some of mankind. I mean, if you had shares in Nintendo and sold them last week, you would have certainly benefited. Overall, it depends what you want out of games. Some games are fun for a long, long time, and people will play them every night for 5 years. Other games are fun for a short while, and then the luster leaves, and they might be something to brighten the mood. But I dare say that wandering around looking for Pokemon on a cold, wet, dark London evening isn't really going to be something that's going to raise your spirits in the middle of winter. So it can change. It really depends. In general, people who are playing Pokemon Go are playing it not just because it's a game, but because it brings with it some other benefits, social benefits. Getting to meet other people and like-minded people, and also you get to do some exercise. And it's cheaper than walking a dog. Cheaper than owning a dog, but roughly the same kind of thing. At the moment, because it's the first mainstream example of this kind of game, it's getting a lot of press and a lot of encouraging things are being said about it. But after a while, once other games like it have been released, because there's certain to be a bandwagon, then we'll be able to look at the concept as a whole with a more critical eye and say, at that point, is this a good idea, or is it a bad idea, or is it just another cynical way to get us all to walk into fast food outlets?
Okay, and lastly, I'm going to ask both of you this question, as you're both game designers. You've mentioned all the criticisms and all the things that could improve. So how would you improve the game going forward? Because from what I can see or hear, it won't last more than a year.
I wouldn't jump to the conclusion that it's not going to last more than a year. Certainly, the level of buzz it's receiving now is unlikely to be sustained in the long term. But players could be playing this game for some time. It really depends how the communities of players hang together. And this is the other side of games that doesn't get talked about too much. Games sustain communities, and it's those communities of players that make the game remain interesting. And actually, Richard's responsible or co-responsible for creating a hugely influential game, which is the ancestral form of a game like Pokemon Go, the MUDs. You mentioned before about fighting depression. I know personally people who got involved in those MUDs, and it did connect them with the community and help them fight off depression in their life. I think there's a power to community that games can leverage, but the power really belongs to the community. And as long as the players stick with Pokemon Go, I think this could be with us for quite some time.
And Dr. Bartle, very quickly, your thoughts and, if you have any sort of improvements to the developments.
Most of the people who are playing today probably won't be playing it in a year's time. You're right, but the game will still be around. Not at the same level of interest as it's got, but it doesn't need to be very big to be sustainable. So in terms of the game itself, if the designers know what they're doing, then they will be releasing general updates continually every few months in order to rekindle people's interest and bring them back. And we know that this works because this is what they've been doing with massively multiplayer online role-playing games for decades. So so long as the designers and the developers are on top of that, then the game should be around for a while yet, and people will have reasons not to leave. But mostly, I guess, people will be leaving because actually the gameplay isn't really all that great.
Okay, on that note, we will have to end the discussion there. Thank you, gentlemen, for that very insightful discussion.